Hey y'all, it's Squirrely Minecraft here yet again, and today we're going to go over some very basic logic gates, and the kind of reason that I'm doing this whole series is so that you guys can gain an understanding of kind of how this whole thing works. And so maybe in the future when you look at stuff and you wonder like how they built it, maybe on YouTube and whatnot, take the time, deconstruct it, figure out how it's working. So the first thing is button. It's very simple. On and off, sends a pulse out. You can extend the pulse pretty easily. This is one of the easiest ways to do it, I think. All it is red wire coming out, repeater set on 1 tick, 4 ticks, 4 ticks, 3 ticks, and all that does is when you hit it, as you can see, by the time the signal goes off here, it's still coming around the other way and it feeds into it, and the delay actually increases the amount of time it does it. So obviously it stays up just a little bit longer, obviously, than the other one. And you can add these in series, too. Like right after this one, you could do another one going around there, and so on and so forth, and add more and more time. Obviously, a simple lever is just on and off. On as long as you want to stay on, off as long as you want to stay off, so on and so forth. And so now that we can use more fun stuff with the lever, as you can see, most everything else down the line is a lever. We're going to start over here with inversion. And so what is inversion? Well, if you take a redstone torch, which is a constant power source, take that power all the way over to a block, as you can see, even though this redstone torch should be on, it's off. And if you put any ones on it, because the block is powered, it turns off the other torch. So it's actually inverting the signal. Now if you really want to mix things up, you can actually see how if you put one over here, that powers this, turns this on, turns this off, thus turning this off, and thus allowing these to be turned on. And if you take it off again, obviously it changes it. And if you put a lever there, it does the same kind of thing. And that's our first idea here called a NOT gate. As you can see, the brick itself is off because there's no power going to it, but the torch is lit up, sending a signal over here, turning that off. Now if I turn on the block, that turns this off, thus turning off the signal and allowing that to turn on. And that's a NOT gate, or an inverted gate, technically what some people call it. Next gate is called an AND gate, and what that is that both of these have to be turned off in order for that to turn on. So one and the other. Two things have to be coming in a certain manner, not necessarily just equal, but a certain manner, in order for the next thing to turn on. So if you have two different inputs coming in and you want them to be equal in a set way, they will both then come over here and invert this signal. So as long as one of these is still on, obviously it's inverting the signal, and then if you turn it off, it changes it and keeps it back on. The next one is called an OR gate. And what that is you have one or the other turn it on. So as you can see, it's on right now, and then if you have either one of these turn on, it turns it off. Doesn't matter what the other one does. As long as one of them is off, the whole thing is off. And all that is you just have the line going up here and turning the torch on and off. Next one is called a clock. And what is a clock for? Well, it pretty much allows you to do rhythmic pacing of anything in your world in terms of output, as you can see. This one's pretty simple. You just build the wires around the torch first, so wires going into however many repeaters you need, however long you want it to take, wires coming back up to the block, and then you just add on your torch at the end. As you can see, it doesn't work, but if I add the torch, ta-da, it starts going again. And then if you want to control it so that you have it not necessarily going all the time, luckily with the new update, that goes without you needing to reset it. In the olden days, this is how you had to do it because you had to reset it every time you came in. But also, if you just want to send out like a dispenser or something in a rhythmic fashion, this is a great way to do it, as well as maybe a memory cell, which is another way of doing it. I'm going to turn this off so it doesn't annoy us. And all that is you just put a lever on that original block, and it allows you to control when this is on and off, as you can see. And if I turn it off, it blocks the signal back here, doesn't let it go through. This is still turned off, so it doesn't send the signal through, and that doesn't go up and down. The next one is called a NAND gate, which is a not AND gate, basically. So as you can see, these are powering this, which is turning this on. So once this are both off, it inverts the signal, and that turns it to the off. It's the same thing as an AND gate, just the signal from here is inverted so that's always on, and then once these both turn off, that turns off. So it can kind of make more sense in some fashion, depending on what you're building. This is a NOR gate. As you can see, yet again, if I turn this on, turns that off, turns that on. So all it is it's an OR gate, but in this case it's a flipped signal. So instead of it being on to off, it's off to on. And all it is you're putting a torch right there, and that's setting that up to be inverted. The next one's called a XOR gate, or XOR gate, which is what I think the real term is actually XOR gate. And as you can see, it's kind of complicated. From above, it's a little bit different. The idea being here that these torches are controlling this torch, which is controlling this wire, which is controlling this torch, which is controlling this wire, which is controlling that, and it's the same thing on the other side, but you have this little hitch in the middle. And what that does is, this is for unequal inputs. So if this is off, then that's off. And if this is off, it actually turns it back on. And the reason that happens is that both of these turn off. That frees up this power line in the middle to turn this on, which then the system no longer cares about the two torches that this stuff is controlling, or that the actual switches back there are controlling. So it allows both these to turn off, and that turns it on again. So if you have an unequal input, as you can see, it turns on this one, which also turns on that one, because that whole block is connected to both of these, which turns on this, which shuts that off, because that would cause some sort of unusual feedback, actually, which turns this on, which turns that on, turns that off, allows that to turn off. So this is if you have inputs that are coming in and you want them to be unequal. If they come in and they're equal, it does one thing, and if they're unequal, it does another, is the idea behind the XOR gate. And then there's an XNOR gate, which is just you invert the signal. So instead of see how it comes up to here with those torches, instead of just going straight to a torch, it still goes to a torch, but you invert the signal coming off of that. And as you can see, unequal inputs will turn that one on, equal input turns it off, unequal on, equal off. This is a pulsed lever, and all that is essentially you're kind of turning a lever into a button. The only downside here being that it's not the same as a button because it doesn't turn on and then off. As you can see, what happens is it actually needs to be reset. If you turn it on, it'll flip that up, and then once this signal gets down there, turns it back off. And how does that work? Well, you have this torch on the side with repeaters coming forward. You have the line coming all the way here, and that's turning this torch on and off. And so when I turn that thing on over there, that turns off that torch, which allows this torch to turn on. Now what's happening also is the signal is starting from that block and is coming up this way down these repeaters and eventually hitting this block and turning it back on, turns this off, and then that brings it back down. And so this would be great as if you need something like a quick pulse cycle of something. And what's fun is you can actually send out multiple pulses, so you see it turns off, then on, then off. And you can do that if you have like a repeater coming into here, and a clock maybe even turning this on and off in a rhythmic fashion. It'd be good for, delayed impulses coming from that. And so finally we come to the coup de grace, which is kind of trying to integrate as many of these things as possible into one simple item. It didn't include like the pulsar or anything. Those are all just basic logic gates. But this is called the RS NOR Latch. Actually holding information, hence the latch. You're actually latching information into a memory cell unit so that it goes forward. And so what does that mean? Well, this is a sequential NOR latch as far as I'm concerned. And the idea here is let's say you have an input coming out here, but you want certain criteria, 1, 2, 3, 4, for instance, to be met. Well, if criteria 4 is met before any of the other criteria are met, it just doesn't work. And you have to have this in sequential, so it actually has to be criteria 1 has to fire first. And so the way that works is, as you can see, you fire this one, that turns on that one, which will then allow this one to turn on. But if I try to turn on this one, as you can see, 1 and 2 hasn't gone yet, so 3 and 4 both can't go yet. So then if I allow 2 to go, 3 can then go, but 4 can't. So you can see 4 still can't. Turn on 3, there you go, 3 activates 4, and 4 turns on the output. Now how does that work? Well, let me just reset it. There's another way to reset it. This is just a simpler way of doing it. You come up here, this starts off the power, and you see currently it's on, so this is going into this block, which is turning off this, hence inverting it. The inverter comes along here, this is off, it's inverted over here yet again, so that allows this to be on. That has nothing to do with that, because remember that's not the right direction from this block, it's not diagonal, it's to the side of this little block right here, because it'd be a fake air block in this area here. That turns on this, which is turning on this, which is therefore inverting this one. As long as this one's off, because this one's on, which comes from all the way back there, that allows this to stay off, and thus you have this, which is actually an AND gate, as you can see above it, to be turned on, which comes over here, is turning this on, comes up here, and this is actually affecting, as you can see, an inverter from the AND gate is actually turning this off, so it's keeping it off. So if I try to turn this one on, this one's still keeping this one off, and it won't let the next sequence fire. However, if I turn this one off, as you can see, this turns off, this turns on, goes on. This turns this into an off state. As you can see, it's usually on, off state, off, That turns this on. This powers this. Inverts this one to turn it off, so it frees up this. As you can see, that one's still glowing, but that one's actually glowing from this thing over here. So if I turn off this, as you can see, that turns off, which allows this thing to go forward, and then that turns on and progresses the cycle from that inversion to inversion, turning this on, allowing the cycle to progress, turning off this AND gate, freeing up this thing. As you can see, that thing's still on, but that's coming from this one. So if I turn that one on, it'll turn that off. And as you can see, if I try to turn on 4, the AND gate over here that isn't turned off yet is still having issues. It won't turn off because this thing hasn't been activated yet. So in order for that thing to go, you have to fire this one. That allows that AND gate to go. As you can see, that's freeing up this one. That turns off this one. And then you can technically have this go for as long as you want. You just keep repeating the same pattern back and forth. Comes over here, turns this on, and that can be your output. I just did 4 for the sake of the fact that you can do it. This can go technically forever. You can have as many inputs as you want to have some sort of final product if you want. A lot of people use these in combination locks and the like. Plenty of different designs on the internet. I'll probably build a tutorial version of this one just so it's very simple, and I'll explain each and every step as I go. Because that's kind of the whole point of this series, is so that you guys can figure out how things work and why they build them a certain way, so that you can build your own cool creations and share them with us, and we can enhance the whole community, hopefully. I hope you enjoyed it. It took all day, so enjoy, and I'll see you guys around.